These two scientists were not friends, but together they helped rid the world of a disease that once left it paralyzed. Let's talk about it. Polio, which is short for poliomyelitis, is caused by the polio virus, which spreads mainly through contaminated water and food, especially in places with poor sanitation. It enters through the mouth, multiplies in the gut, and in some cases travels to the spinal cord where it damages the nerves to cause paralysis. And just so you know, there are 3 serotypes of poliovirus, and immunity to one type does not protect you from having the others, so you need protection against all the 3. Polio has existed for millennia. In fact, some Egyptian papyri contain drawings of people with withered limbs thought to be due to polio. In the early 20th century, polio epidemics were on the rise. By epidemics, I mean sudden spikes in the number of polio cases, far above what was normally expected in a region. Polio terrorized industrial nations, especially the United States. During outbreaks, hospital wards were filled with scores of sick children in iron lungs, which were huge machines which breathed for them because their chest muscles were paralyzed. In 1952, the United States saw one of its worst polio epidemics. Over 57,000 cases and over 21,000 cases of paralysis. While this was going on, American virologist Jonas Salk and his team were working on an inactivated or killed version of the polio vaccine. In 1954, Jonas Salk's inactivated polio vaccine, or IPV for short, underwent one of the largest field trials in medical history, and it was a success. Finally, in 1955, Salk's IPV was announced to be safe, effective, and ready for public use. Now, while Jonas Salk was working on his inactivated polio vaccine, or IPV, another American virologist called Albert Sabin was working on another type of polio vaccine called the oral polio vaccine. While Jonas Salk used an inactivated or killed version of the virus in his vaccine, Albert Sabin used a live but weakened or attenuated version of the virus in his oral polio vaccine. Now, because Albert Sabin's OPV was taken orally, it could induce immunity in your intestine, which is where the virus multiplies and enters into the bloodstream. It could be likened to a natural infection, only that it was a weakened form of the virus. Now, after Albert Sabin had refined his oral polio vaccine, he couldn't really do a field trial in the United States because by then Salk's IPV had already been adopted. There were also fears that the virus could revert to a more dangerous form since it wasn't a killed version of the virus. Another reason was because Jonas Salk's IPV had more political backing, so instead he partnered with the Soviet virologists to launch massive field trials of the oral polio vaccine across the Soviet Union, which eventually proved its safety and effectiveness at an unprecedented scale. Shortly after Albert Sabin's trial, the oral polio vaccine became licensed in the United States, and by the 1970s, most countries had switched to the oral polio vaccine. It was cheaper and easier to administer and did not require any injections, and a major advantage was that it triggered immunity in the intestines, where the virus usually multiplies. By activating the immune cells in the intestine, it reduced the virus's ability to replicate there, which meant less of the virus would be shed in stool, which also meant less chances of spreading it to others. But even if the virus was shed in stool and someone got exposed to it, that person would be indirectly immunized. This widespread chain of transmitting this weak or attenuated version of the polio virus from the OPV could help immunize entire communities without them even knowing they were immunized. Now, because Albert Sabin used a live but weakened version of the virus in his oral polio vaccine, there's a very small risk that the virus could mutate back to a harmful form, which can lead to what is known as vaccine-derived polio, particularly in communities with low vaccination coverage. So both vaccines had their highs and lows. Now, although these two scientists helped the world fight off one of its most dreaded diseases, it was no secret that they were sharply critical of each other. Albert Sabin was famously known to have dismissed Jonas Salk's vaccine as pure kitchen chemistry. Jonas Salk, on the other hand, was very skeptical of Sabin's use of a live virus. But in the end, it did not even matter because despite their differences, their combined efforts became one of the greatest public health achievements in history. Hope you learned a thing or two.